It's like the three crosses up here with two criminals on both sides.
Oh, thank you.
Well, it's a
Have we got the, yeah, we got everything on. All right, we're good to go.
between two thieves. How are you doing? Is this all right to make sure
Yeah, it is on. I'm glad we take matters seriously. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our ARPA Oversight. I don't think we need to have necessarily a roll. I'll declare that we've got a quorum unless there's an objection. No objections? Okay, we're good to go. We have our agenda, Alabama Department of Finance. We have a memo that's been presented. I think that is that the three-pager here? Yeah, three-pager on the letterhead of Department of Finance. And if you will notice, it's only 3 pages because the print is what, 8? Yeah, I understand. All right. Well, with that, Ms. Wilhelm, would you mind coming up and kicking us off here, if you don't mind?
Good morning. Thank you. So we've prepared a memo for this meeting today. It's a summation of where we are, what's going on. The very small font that we refer to, this is an Excel spreadsheet on the back, and these are all of the fundings as this is a snapshot of today. The most important thing I'd like to mention is on July 31st is when our annual report to U.S. Treasury is due. We're going to be starting to work on that report in the next couple or few days. We have our end of quarter reporting coming in. That report is a very large report. It includes narratives about all of these programs that you see on the green spreadsheet, as well as an expenditure report on the backside of it. Last year's report, when we were really only had ARPA 1 funds rolling and some ARPA 2 funds, last year's report was over 400 pages. So this year's report will be significantly, probably twice that, we expect. I think the only other matter is regarding obligation of funds. Right now, we are receiving reports, particularly from the community funding bucket, as we call it, about where they are on their grant programs and their obligating of their funds. We're reviewing those as we go through, but we do not expect any of those funds to not be fully obligated by Treasuries or our deadline. So,
the report you mentioned, July 31st, in my discussions with the director, we're looking at doing another ARPA meeting August, September timeframe after that report is complete, so we can have a more complete review of everything. Is that accurate?
yes, sir.
Okay.
And of course, if there are any questions about the spreadsheet numbers, please give us a call and we'll be glad to walk you through those.
You made a mention also when you said that you don't anticipate, let me rephrase that. ARPA 1 and ARPA 2, you anticipate being completely and fully appropriated?
Obligated.
Obligated.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Anybody got any questions? Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I did want to, and I commented to you, Susan, a while ago coming in, there was a timely article about the work that Southern Research is doing, and then that kind of that precision medicine, their catalyst program. So certainly maybe next time, Mr. Chairman, maybe we'll have Southern Research in here and kind of hear where they're at with the $20 million of ARPA that we allocated to them as well, and maybe mental health to come in and have a conversation, some of those grants. But thank you for the update. Appreciate your work.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir, Senator.
The last time we talked about MOAs with other entities that the governmental entities had to sign in order to facilitate. Have all of those been signed? Or?
Yes, ma'am. The entire ARPA 1 and ARPA 2, both of those tranches are, as we say, fully MOA'd, memorandums of agreement. I have 2 on my desk right now that are very small MOAs out of the community funding bucket. One of the programs that you'll see on the Excel was a grant program we ran for after-school and enrichment programs. Largely nonprofits and faith-based organizations applied for that. We allocated, I believe, $4 million for that. We had a little bit left over. And so we're going back to other entities that maybe had applied, and we're going to do some MOAs to clear up some of their expenses. These are not going to be programming funds. These are COVID-related expenses that were not reimbursed. So that'll be the end of it. Okay.
Any other questions for the Finance Department? Thank you. I appreciate that. We look forward to hearing from you later in the summer.
After the report.
Yes, ma'am. Next on the agenda, we have ADECA. ADECA has also have we have a written report on that. We have anybody here from ADECA? Ah, I thought so. We have, I think it's a 2-page memo here listing out the different capital projects and grants that's running through ADECA. Can you give us a brief summary of this summarization?
Yes, sir. Well, first I wanted to say I'm Ashley Toole. I'm Deputy Director of ADECA, and I'm here on behalf of Director Boswell this morning. He sends his regrets that he couldn't be here. He had an event and community visit in North Alabama he had to attend.
Yes, he said he scheduled that after I informed him, but beside the point.
So with that, I want to just turn it over to Maureen Neighbors, our Digital Expansion Division Chief, and she'll go over the report.
Excellent. Thank you. Good morning.
So just a few updates from the last time. With our ARPA 1, we had our statewide middle mile network. That project was awarded in February of '23, and we are approximately 33% complete based on our last biweekly meeting that we hold with the subrecipient to track progress. That is a project that is been awarded for $82.45 million. We anticipate roughly 2,947 miles of leased fiber to be added to the statewide middle mile network and 433 miles of new construction fiber. Under ARPA 2, we have what we called the AIM program, and that was the Anchor Institution Middle Mile Program. That was a program where we had up to $245 million to award for additional middle mile, but with a focus on benefit to community anchor institutions. And community anchor institutions are colleges and universities, they're hospitals, they're research facilities, other public places that are community anchors. And so we asked the applicants to describe how their middle mile would not just extend middle mile, but would also benefit community anchor institutions. We received numerous applications, and the governor announced roughly $188,453,905 of award in February. Most of those, we anticipate the majority of those subaward agreements being in the hands of our subrecipients in the next few days. So those should be executed very soon. With those, we will see roughly more than 4,000 miles worth of middle mile infrastructure, and that's a combination of lease and construction. And we're looking at almost 800 community anchor institutions benefiting from that program. We had a lot of good applications, a lot of good project, but even so, there was some funding left over. So we actually had a second round of AIM funding, AIM 2. And with that, our intent is to fund a single project to use the remaining money. It's significantly the same as the AIM 1 project, the primary difference being that there were 2 counties in the previous 2 middle mile programs that hadn't been included, and we wanted to make sure that those 2 counties were included in these middle mile investments. So that was a priority for the applicants. Those applications have been reviewed and cured, and the legislative notification process will begin in the next few days. So we are anticipating an announcement very soon from the governor about the successful applicant. So those are the primary ARPA funds that we have been talking about. Just to fill you in on the Capital Projects Fund, which is also ARPA funding. With that one, we also are anticipating a second round. We completed a first round. We were able to conditionally award 66 projects. All of those right now have been conditionally awarded and announced, and we are looking at clearing up what we call our letter of conditional commitment, so all the little things that they have to take care of before we can issue a subaward agreement. And we are in the process of doing that now. They all have 2 years to complete, just as in the AIM project. Under extenuating circumstances, they can ask for minor extensions, but all of the extensions will be within the deadline established by Department of Finance and by Treasury. They're in our AIM programs and in our CPF program, we are requiring them to do quarterly reports so that we can keep track on their status and identify any issues that may be coming up that need our attention, that something's not moving as quickly as we think it should. With CPF2, we received the applications. We have about 50 that we're still reviewing. They're in various stages of curing. So we hope to be conditionally awarding those in the next several weeks. So that's where we are as of today.
Two particular questions I have, if I might start off. Number one is, the goal here is to make sure that we have all of these funds expended, i.e. spent, gone, from our coffers, meaning that this infrastructure will be in the ground prior to December 31st of 2026. That's 18 months away, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you mentioned about a 2-year time frame and extension. How does that coordinate? How do we fix that? Are we going to have these funds expended, spent, and this infrastructure in the ground by the deadline, December 31st, 26?
So the 2 years is the clock starts based on the effective date of the subaward agreement, which is dated in February. So they have until February of 26 to complete the projects. If they ask for an extension, it would only be for a matter of a few months to give us plenty of time to be closed out by that December 26th requirement, or December 2026 requirement.
Are all the monies that we've put into all these programs, has it been obligated?
So the AIM 2 will obligate the state and local fiscal recovery funds, and that conditional award should be made very soon. The CPF 2, those there's still funding left there that we are rushing to get those out so that we can get those under subaward agreement.
How much money is left unobligated at this point, do you know?
In CPF, in the AIM program, it's roughly $53 million. In CPF, the number, we have a few projects that were conditionally awarded, but that after we did the federally required, what they call deduplication, to make sure that we weren't funding project areas that were already served with broadband, we found some projects that had recently become served. So those will probably get rescinded. So the number that we have available under CPF hasn't been locked down yet.
Did we not have a goal of having everything obligated by June 1st of this year? Or am I misinterpreting something?
So the CPF did not fall under that category. This was outside of that.
Is there a deadline for obligation time?
I believe it's the end of this calendar year, but
Okay.
we're not going to wait till then.
And you're getting reports quarterly, right?
Yes, sir.
And that next quarter is, I guess, July? Is that the same time as the quarterly report for the?
Yes.
Okay. So when we come back in August, September timeframe, we should have a better grip on this.
Yes, sir.
Correct? Is it anticipated that we'll have the obligation of all the funds by that point?
I certainly hope so.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I don't mean to be redundant, but I too had a similar question related to, because in the finance report, it does identify that December 2024 deadline for the obligations. And then, of course, we're all familiar with the December of 2026 deadline. But is there a deadline there for the agencies in between that time period? Will we have a time that we clearly identify, hey, we may have a problem here. These funds may not be expended, because of the late time frame. Is there a deadline for the agencies so we would see that a problem, identify a problem?
So our of course, why we have the February 2026 deadline is so that we will have ample time to identify if there are any issues, if we weren't able to expend, give an opportunity to figure out what we would do with any remaining funds.
Okay.
So that February of 2026, and those extensions would only be offered if there was clear evidence that those projects just needed a little more time to finish. If they hadn't started yet, that's not, I mean, we would already know because of the quarterly reports, but we're not looking for trying to run up to the last minute. This is just letting them finish up something that's almost finished. But that February 2026 is really what we're shooting for.
Okay, great. So do you have the administrative ability to reallocate those funds within your department? Or is that something would come back in front of this body?
We would go to the Digital Expansion Authority and work with them.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Follow up on that too. The purpose of having another oversight September, August-September timeframe is based upon the December 31st, 24 obligation deadline. I think this body is of the mind that if we don't have everything obligated by that point, then the question is, should we or how do we step in or involve at that point? So just keep that in mind.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a few.
I'm sure you do.
Maureen, thanks for being here this morning. The last bullet point under your CPF 1 indicates that we're serving 53,892 residents. Is that residents or is that households?
Households, businesses, and community anchors. So you're correct. That should be
Just making sure there's some fidelity in how we're, the terminology there. And we're looking at awards of $148,339,141 with a matching complement of over $171 million and change. That gives you just shy of $320 million of investment. Is that correct? Okay. For just shy again of 54,000 rooftops, if you will, connections.
correct.
Okay, that's averaging just shy, it's $5,937 per connection. Okay, so we're just shy of 6,000, we'll use round numbers for each connection. So I asked Director Boswell when we first started out on this, are we considering alternatives, alternative technologies? I mentioned specifically Starlink, okay? And he said, in one word, yes. And he did not expound upon that at all, did not offer to expand at all. And so I asked this question again, is the department looking at alternative technologies that are much lower costs to implement, especially as we look at much higher cost per rooftop as we get out in rural areas where we're going to end up in cost per rooftop in $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to touch some of these people when we could have invested in technology that cost $600 a rooftop instead of $6,000 a rooftop and cover 10 times as many people right now today. So my question, there is a question there is the department looking at lower cost emergent technologies that work and work today?
Yes. So with the federal funds, the requirements for the service levels, any technology that can meet the service levels that are required is eligible to apply for the funds.
So we're waiting on them to apply,
Yes.
but we're not looking at trying to implement something at much lower cost. We're just waiting on them to do it.
We're implementing the federal program as we're required to.
That's a little disappointing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments, and I appreciate your pointing these out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to follow up on that as well. I would encourage the department to look outside for other ways and instead of reach out to these other industries or other avenues to cut down the cost. It just seems that's what we need to do. Instead, if you can do 6,000 as opposed to, getting at 600, why would we not actively be looking for those partners?
Thank you.
That was a question. Why would we not be actively looking for those partners?
I would love to continue the conversation where we can show you some of the technology that we have been working with and some of the different companies we've been working with. So we'd love to set up a meeting with you to talk about it.
Yeah, because this money we know is some one-time money that we have, and we need to maximize it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question
Senator?
just for clarification. So when you put it out there, or do you send it out to companies such as Senator Elliott has spoken of that you know has the technology, or what you have in-house that's using, do they have same or similar? Certainly we're trying to save money, we're trying to maximize, and again, this is one-time money. We're not going to see it again. We want to touch as many people, make an impact on as many people as we can. So is it not, forbidden that you all can approach it, okay, this company has this technology, or maybe he knows about it, sending them something to say, did you know that this was open?
So we widely advertise our funding opportunities. We have webinars and workshops. We send out through an email notification that we have invited all industry partners to sign up for. We have active outreach for getting them to report their current service in the state. So we have a pretty active email list of all of the companies who are active in Alabama, and we reach out to them directly whenever we have a funding opportunity.
Okay, but does the company that you all are currently using, you mentioned that there are a lot of technological things that you all are already incorporating right now. So does that save money as this one would, as far as being able to reach more people? Would that allow us to do that with the current system that you're using?
Could you ask the question again? I'm not sure.
Well, you said that you all currently have some technology that you all are already employing right now. I'm just want to know if it's going to do the same or similar things, or can we get that result?
So any technology that can meet the minimum standard of the federal requirements, they can apply for funds.
Okay, but minimum requirement, does it get the best bang for the buck? And that's where we are trying to reach,
Right.
I think.
Well, it's a federal standard, so if they meet the federal standard, regardless of the technology type, they would be eligible to apply for the funds.
Okay. I would suggest that we try to go beyond, not necessarily looking at minimum requirements, because if you get minimum requirements, you get minimum results. And what we're trying to do is to stretch this money as far as we can to impact the lives of as many residents as we can. Again, it's one-time money, so, I agree that we should at least explore that. If there's a group that's out there, or technology, who knows? Thank you.
If I might make the occasion to speak possibly for this body, would ADECA provide, by the time we come back, August, September timeframe, an explanation as to the Starlink technology and why it has not, or if we have not reached out, or possibly even reach out and have an answer or response why that's not a particular part here? That, as was mentioned by the senator, that was asked at the get-go, and the answer is somewhat unsatisfactory. We'd like to give you the opportunity to get to a means of reaching out to that, if need be, to find out and get an answer. Would that be too burdensome?
I can't speak to that, but I'm sure if you wanted to check with Director Boswell, he could either answer your question or set up a meeting.
Well, we may go further than that. We may, that's fine. We'll figure out how we're going to handle that. We may send a letter or something along that line, making that official request to make sure that we get that base covered. Our obligation is to make sure that the money is used in the best way possible. And the concern here is that we're dealing with old technology and not in the future. That's where we want to make sure we're going in. Any other questions? Thank you. Appreciate it. ADEM.
Good morning.
Mr. LaFleur, how are you?
I am well. I hope everybody's well this morning.
You have, I think, a good presentation here for us to see up on the board, and that's also in print here, is that not?
I believe you do have a copy.
Okay.
And in larger font.
I'm older too.
Hit it.
All right. You'll see these slides are very similar to the ones that we showed at our last update, and the numbers have been updated, obviously. ARPA 1 first. ADEM was responsible for $220 million of that. In addition to that $220 million, there was allocated to the Department of Public Health. But when I refer to these, I'll be looking at the $220 million of ARPA 1 that ADEM was responsible for. Just to refresh your memory, ARPA 1 had $120 million of that $220 million that was assigned for projects that would not be required to have any match associated with the funds that went to those projects. These are water and sewer projects. The remaining $100 million was to solicit match money from the various water and sewer systems to the degree that they were able to provide match. Out of that $200 million, we have 174 projects. As you can see on the screen here, 97 were drinking water and 77 were clean water or sewer projects. The match funding that came with those is $183 million. So we increased the bang for the buck, if you will, from $220 million to $408 million, which is the 183 plus the 220 plus the $5 million. That was ARPA 1. Now, ARPA 2, there was $395 million that was appropriated, and of that amount, $195 million did not require a match. The remaining $200 million was broken into two pieces. $100 million was associated with those projects that were required to provide match as they were able to financially. The remaining $100 million was a minimum of 35% match for those projects. So we have, in ARPA 2, we have 335 projects that were funded through ARPA 2, and the breakdown is 134 drinking water with 104 clean water or sewer projects, and then 97 stormwater projects. If you take the grand total, we have 509 projects. That's the 174 from ARPA 1 and the 335 from ARPA 2 for a grand total of 509 projects. The funding that was available from the ARPA funding as well as the match, and you can see in ARPA 2, the match was very substantial at $480 million. So grand total, out of the 220 plus the 395, we've funded projects totaling $875 million. Now, this does not fund all of the projects that we have available to us, and if any of these projects run into a problem, obviously we will have a backup of a project that can be funded with any of these that may run into a problem. All of those funds are committed. All are committed for the 12/31/24 date. They have been committed. They meet the federal requirement for commitment.
If I might, before you go any further, help me with my math.
Okay.
How much did we wind up putting in the ground, or once it's completed? What's the total with shares, with matches and others? How much we wind up getting in the ground here?
$875 million.
Now that's on ARPA 2, right?
That's for both ARPA 1 and ARPA 2, the sum of those two.
All right, 875 mil.
Correct.
That sounds like a lot.
Yes, it is. It does do a lot of work for upgrading water and sewer systems in the state. It does not cover all of the potential projects that are out there. And that includes, we have other sources of funding that we're not reporting on today.
Correct.
But if you take all of the sources of funding that we have, it will fund approximately half of the projects that have been submitted for upgrades to water and sewer systems in the state.
So the 875 million is an additional amount that we've put into the ground other than what has and would typically be done through normal course of actions, correct?
Correct. Let me make one correction here. The 875 million is the 395 for ARPA 2 plus the 480 in match, and then we have to add to that the 408 million. I misspoke when I gave you that number. So the grand total would be $1.3 billion.
That's more like what I thought my math was.
You're correct. I'm sorry, I misspoke.
That's all right. That's why I want to double check.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. Continue.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Oh, certainly.
While we've got a break here, Director, I just want to commend you and the chairman, because it was his amendment, if I remember correctly, especially on the ARPA 2, to require the matching funds. And I just think it's of note to stop and look and see just how much further we've stretched this funding by requiring and encouraging those systems that can match to do so. 35% is not a little number, and I think you've seen, if I'm looking at the reports that I've read correctly, because that's what I do for fun, significant increases above the 35% in many cases. And so I'm seeing a total matching of $663 million out of this. That's a big deal to be able to lever what we were given here and make it go as far as we can. And so I just wanted to stop and say something positive.
Well, thank you, sir. Point well taken. Now, when the match funds came in, we did not encourage people to go to a match that would put them in financial stress. We have a formula that we use to make sure that they have adequate debt service coverage ratios to withstand unforeseen costs that they may have in the future. But those that are able to financially, we've encouraged them to provide that match.
And you already stated that the time frame for obligating the funds has already been met.
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. This next slide, the status of these agreements. I mentioned that we have extended and committed 509 projects. We have signed contracts back that have been finalized for 458 of those, and there are 51 that remain open for signature. And the reasons for those delays on these individual systems are several. Typically, we require, as you as a body have requested, and as we have requested also, that they make sure that they have a sustainable program in place, which means they have to do things such as review their rates on a regular basis and make sure that they will be able to not be in the same position that they are today. They'll be in a better position down the road, and we won't be seeing these needs pop back up in 5 years. Another reason why there are some delays is several of these projects involve multiple systems, and those multiple systems enter into memorandums of understanding to make sure that all the parties are clear as to what their responsibilities are in that. And those take a little bit of time. It's a process that sometimes gets a little involved with political activities.
I can't imagine that.
No, but that's another reason why we often have one of these or more of these 51 coming, and then finally updated financial audits. Many of these systems never had a financial audit, and that's one of our requirements that also figures into the sustainability, making sure that they have good practices, financial practices for developing reserves for replacement of equipment when its life cycle is finished.
I appreciate your efforts on this. I will also, if I may, on those 51, like you said, the 458's been signed. They're moving forward. The 51 are delays because of other reasons. I think by our next meeting, August, September timeframe, I think what we're going to like to have is a more detailed breakdown as to who is going to make this, who's going to get their audits done, who's not going to, who's going to get the sustainability plan done, and who isn't. Because at that point, we need to make sure that we meet the December deadline and can't just keep delaying, if that makes sense. Anybody have a issue about that?
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea, Mr. Chairman, and a comment when it's appropriate.
All right.
Okay.
I just want to get a clarification on this, the people that you're working with, the other entities. These are governmental entities, right?
Yes, they are boards of water and sewer systems. Sometimes they are owned by the community, and sometimes they're an independent body, but they're all governmental bodies.
Do they not see the benefit of overall how this is going to help them? And there is a deadline that is looming, and if it is not met, more than likely this money is going to be, because we don't want to lose anything and we don't want to leave anything on the table. Money is going to be given to another system. So I'm just trying to understand the pushback and not the urgency of trying to get this done.
Well, there are many stories that can support reasons for that. We have one system that is on the verge of collapse and decided not to accept grant money because that would require them to have the system
There's no sustainability
not
there.
provide funding for other needs of that small community. And there are some
So let me ask you this then. In that situation, I mean, obviously you've got, this is a service that you need. So what is the gap fill for them?
Well, it's a difficult situation in a number of the cases where people have not seen the benefit. We work with them one-on-one to try to walk them through it, work with their boards to try. In fact, we've met with their boards. Boards sometimes are at odds with the manager of the system or the mayor, and trying to work through those kinds of issues. It depends on the individual system. It may end up that they will need to consolidate with somebody down the road if they don't address their problems in a way that's reasonable.
And these are not necessarily like county systems. These are like little small independent systems or small municipalities.
Typically, these are municipal systems.
Okay.
They work for a municipality as opposed to a countywide system, although there are some countywide systems also.
I was just wondering if there was anything that the county could do to kind of help coalesce, get everybody on the same page, but maybe not.
Well, sometimes that works. We've got a pretty good example of that in North Alabama where the county and the several municipalities have worked together to come up with a good solution to a program. Let me make something clear.
If I might, I got a question come up on my text, if I might, on this. On the 51, and we get our meetings and the delineations, should some of these 51, let's say 46 of them, just ballpark, that are unable or look like they may be unable to comply or will not, is there backup projects involved with this? Do you have a secondary tier of movement into?
Yes, sir. Yes. And I'll have that on this next slide. But we have more projects than we have funds available.
Welcome to our world, yeah.
And we have done the work to qualify those for funding. And if for any reason, any project, whether it's one that's been finalized or one that has not been finalized, the documentation, that project can be moved, or those funds can be moved to a different project quickly. We also, if anybody has a deadline problem, we have other sources of funding that we can replace the ARPA funds and move the ARPA funds to a project that can expend them in the timeline.
Excellent, excellent.
Now, the point I want to make is, once we have made the commitment the department has made the commitment to these systems to provide funding. That meets the federal requirement for commitment. What we have from them is an acceptance of that commitment. Now, the 51 delaying does not interfere with the ARPA funds having been committed already. So don't let me misspeak here. All of the funds have been committed from the standpoint of federal requirements.
They just haven't committed to you.
Right. They have to accept the commitment, come back to us.
So
we have made a commitment.
So if I may, real quick, Mr. Chairman, while we've interrupted the director, I wanted to get into the 51 just a little bit more. So here we are, 2 years out from what is your internal deadline out on your next slide. Sorry, I read ahead. So we're full 2 years out from that. I would opine that of those 51, there are probably a good number of them that aren't going to sign the agreement. I would bet that they're just going to run into a problem, that you're going to have a problem. And all I would say and encourage is, to the extent that we can make that determination sooner rather than later so that we can use that money in the 2 years that we have left, I would encourage that. I understand we want to give them as much time as possible to work through whatever their issues are, which is probably that last bullet point on the page there. But while we wait on them to do that, I don't want to miss the opportunity to put this money into use and where it can be used by making that determination earlier on. And I know each scenario is different, but I imagine that if you look through those 51, you're going, yeah, that one's going to be a problem, that one's going to be a problem. And so I think the earlier we can make some of those determinations, the better able we'll be able to spend this money.
We share your concern and your attention to that.
Well, that makes me sound smart, so thanks.
As we talk about the deadlines, December 31, 24, we're all aware of the deadline to have the funds obligated. We have obligated those funds, as I said. Now, during the time between December 31, 24, and 26, problems can arise. We are using June 1, 26 for the construction period. June 1, 26, 7 months before the deadline. The project has to demonstrate the ability to complete the construction within the statutory requirements. And we will be monitoring. This is normal course of business for us. We've been in the State Revolving Fund loan program for 30 years. So we typically monitor construction progress, and we will be looking at the progress on all of these for the December 31, 26 deadline. Now, we have already corresponded with each of the recipients of a commitment from ARPA, and they have to report on the status of expenditures of the funds by 2024. June 21 of 24. Now these are the control measures that we put in place and the tracking actions that we have. They need to tell us what their schedule is for construction by June 21 of 24. Now, if they have not completed the bid process, then they don't have a construction schedule. But correct. And if they have not completed the bid process, if they've already completed the bid process, then we have a construction schedule and we have the control points, the milestones, if you will, to determine if they're meeting that construction schedule. But if they have not completed the bid process, then we will be getting monthly reports from each of these 509 projects starting in August, and determine if the timeline can be met for the 12/31/26 construction completion. Now, we try to work with them on how to go about doing all of this, but they are just now starting to spend money. The projects are already, a number of them are already underway, and they are spending the money. Typically, it's engineering is the money first out the door, and then you have the other pieces going to the general contracts. But we have put in place these control mechanisms to make sure that there are no surprises. We have a backup. Chairman, we talked briefly about inflation. Some of these bids that have come in, the original estimates are being inaccurate from the standpoint of inflation. They're coming in higher. No surprise there. As time goes by, inflation is going to hit on these more and more. And our backup on that one is we have funds that are available for the next several years from other sources that we will supplement these projects, the ARPA projects, if funding is not adequate from ARPA to fund the project. We have another source of funding to be able to fund that. Now, these funds that are coming.
Let me ask a direct question in regard to that. As I think what I believe I heard was that from the general fund standpoint, we are not anticipating a request to cover additional inflationary costs to complete these projects.
No, we were not anticipating that. If it's an offer.
It is not offered. It is not offered. Just making sure we're on the same page.
All right. Yeah, I thought y'all might be reluctant to do that, but it never hurts to ask. So, yeah, we are working on contingency. We make sure we have contingency plans for each of these. If any of these projects has a hiccup, there are 509, and there are bound to be hiccups on some of them, and we have provisions for those hiccups. If a project is delayed, we can use a different source of funding and take the ARPA portion and apply it to another project to make sure that all the ARPA funds are out the door. And if inflation hits, we have future funds. Of course, that will mean we won't be able to fund some of the projects that are still in the queue because we have to use those funds to cover inflation. But we have enough in the queue that if any of these have a problem, we can quickly find a substitute. And we have them ranked. They are ranked so we know immediately which is the next project in the queue.
Sounds like it's done by engineers. Questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I want to tell you, Director, and Mr. Kelly both, I started this process very concerned about us getting this money out in time and implemented and in the ground and spent, obligated and expended in time. And I will just say I feel much better. I am very impressed with the level of detail and accountability and the checking back in. It's a lot of money, a lot of different projects, 509, all the different politics and MOUs and agreements and everything. There's a lot of moving pieces. And to hear that you have these ranked, that you're checking back in with monthly progress reports, this is all very encouraging. And the only thing I will add to that is this bullet point that says the department will determine if timeline can be met based on proposed construction schedule. I would just say to that, be very conservative. If it's not going to work, it's going to look bad on us and y'all. It won't look bad on them because they'll have an excuse. It will have rained or something. But be very conservative would be my encouragement. And there are other funds, as you mentioned, that can be moved around in order to handle that. But this is good stuff. And again, I just wanted to sing your praises and your staff's praises. I like the accountability here. I have a much higher degree of confidence that this is going to work out.
Well, thank you for the second time.
Yes, sir.
Today. You've heard the phrase, takes longer, costs more. We understand that process.
Questions?
Just a statement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we began this process back some time ago, it was very important to me to let's get into these rural communities and really make a change that they could never really afford for their water projects and their sewer projects. And I would like to commend you, your staff, because a lot of this has been a lot of hand-holding throughout the process, a lot of structure that's been set up to help these smaller municipalities and these water authorities. So I want to say thank you. You went the extra mile, in my opinion, to help bring and improve the sewer and water projects across Alabama, and in particular in these small municipalities and rural counties. And I thank you, and I certainly appreciate the staff for all their hard work. And let it be known, Senator Elliott and I do agree on something. So thank you.
This is the kind of meeting I like to have. We certainly do our best. And I've got several folks over here. These are the folks that work nights and weekends to get this done. There are several hundred additional projects that we have that are not ARPA-related projects. And
You've done all this without increasing staff, without increasing expenses?
we have not
costs.
increased staff. We have not taken one penny of ARPA funding for administrative costs.
And this has all been done with existing infrastructure that we have without additional hiring or additional folks that's taken from this. I have my compliments to you, sir.
That you are correct in that statement, and I have to sing the praises of these people. I tell them this is something they can be proud of for the rest of their careers, what they've been doing here.
Senator?
I just want to, not only you, but I'm very impressed, but all of the presentations. I mean, you know, there were some little quirks and things that we had some questions about. Naturally, we want to get the bang for the buck. But, you know, at the end of the day, when this is all said and done, it really, the credit goes to all of you all that have worked so hard on it. I'm thinking back when we first started this process, and I'm like, this is a lot of money, not just the state of Alabama. You look at nationally, and the problem that my concern was how are you going to get these projects out? Because everybody's doing it, contractors, engineers, the whole 9 yards. Everybody's looking for those same people, so the resources. But you all have done an outstanding job. Alabama's a little bit different from everybody else in the sense that we tend to have a little need for a little bit more hand-holding and follow back up and patience, because sometimes we don't have everything in order. I want to thank you all for doing that and being sensitive to the citizens of Alabama and helping them to work through this process. But to the people who have not come forward as far as getting your stuff together, not the word I want to use, but getting your stuff together, it's time to get on board, because you don't want to lose this opportunity that probably won't come along again. So thank you.
Your point's well taken about supply chain, and our strategy on supply chain is to be first in line. So we're ahead of what a lot of other people are doing. So hopefully we have a low number on the tab for next in line to be serviced. But your point is very well taken. Sure. There's going to be supply chain problems developing more and more over time.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
yeah, through all the praise, I forgot to ask my question.
Come on, somebody needs to be critical.
So we have 51 projects that we're awaiting agreements for. Do we have a dollar amount of what that looks like for those 51?
That 51, let me ask our
Okay.
folks if they have
Thank you.
an estimate on that.
We can get back to you, but it's not a huge, it's not a, I didn't think to calculate that.
Yeah,
30
we're-
million, you said,
Well, it's-
maybe 30, 40 million?
It's roughly 10% of the total number of projects, so you could apply that 10% to the total dollar value, and that would probably be a reasonable guess, would you think?
We'll find that out.
We'll get you that.
in
Thank
August,
you, Dad.
September.
Thank
you. Now, I think that's all the questions. I think that completes our hearing, but let me say this, if I might. What we've seen today is an example of government working correctly. My compliments to this body for showing up, for asking the questions, not only today, but previously, and the aspects of trying to make sure we get things done correctly. The next thing is to the whole institution of the government, from the executive branch and the agencies that have done such a great job in watching. And I emphasize, without increasing government, without increasing employees, without increasing infrastructure, as far as programs. We won't have anybody to lay off once this is finished. We will continue operations in a way, working nights and weekends, doing those things that are necessary. My compliments to the executive department, all the agencies that's been involved with this, because this is truly an example of government working correctly and properly for the benefit of the population. Anyway, with that, we'll stand adjourned. I'm sorry, did you have a comment?
Well, I'll just quickly piggyback that, and then I'll let everybody go on this summer day. But I agree. The message, I think, has been consistent between the governor's office, the executive budget office, and the legislature, that we know we have seen an anomaly here of increased revenues over the last few years, some of the largest budgets Alabama's ever seen. But our message has been consistent. It's one-time money. We knew that, as the chairman said. We didn't grow our agencies to manage this money, and we know it'll be gone by 2026. So I just applaud the governor's office and the executive budget office and all of our agencies. So we appreciate your work.
If I could make a comment, I want to tip my hat to the governor's office and the legislature for the vision that got all this rolling.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.